What countries don't seem dangerous but really are? Story 1. Norway. Each year, quite a lot of tourists die here because they underestimate nature. People come here to get some amazing pictures they've seen online and then don't realize that you need appropriate clothes, gear, and that you should probably not take a selfie at the edge of a giant drop. Also, since it's regularly asked in Norwegian travel forums, no, you can't just go hiking in northern Norway in the winter without skis, snowshoes, especially not in avalanche-prone areas. As a Canadian, I understand this completely. In the more touristy areas of Western Canada, there's an ongoing problem with tourists putting themselves in awful situations, and sometimes paying for it with their lives. If you're hiking in the mountains on a remote trail, then don't leave the path. Don't take a shortcut, and don't underestimate how long it will take to find you if you get lost and how harsh the elements are if you're delayed/injured for any reason and don't have appropriate gear. Also, wild animals are wild animals. Just because a beaver is cute doesn't mean it's not going to be scared of you. And if it's scared of you and you corner it, it will attack you to defend itself. And since it's capable of cutting down trees with its teeth, it won't have much trouble biting through your leg. My wife and I hiked up Gros Morne in Newfoundland. While it's not a massive climb, the loop to the summit is 16 kilometers and takes 8 hours, and all the signage warns to be prepared for changes in weather. About 5 kilometers along the trail, and after a scramble up a fairly lengthy rock scree to a flat plateau, we ran into an American couple and their 2 early teenage kids. We stopped and chatted a bit with them. All of them were in shorts and t-shirts, as we were, since it was July. The family had no packs with clothing, food, or water, with the exception of a box of crackers which the boy was eating out of. We showed the father approximately where we were on the map we had brought with us, and his face dropped. He turned to the kids and said, "We need to go, now," and they hurried off. We sat and had a nice lunch. After we'd touched the peak, the wind off the ocean picked up to a crazy amount, and we put on our fleece and rain gear. The temperature with the wind chill was probably about 10 degrees Celsius. We didn't see the family again, so they either looped back out of our sight or half ran the rest of the trail. I felt sorry for them, but the signs were everywhere warning people of the distance and weather. I'm a big fan of the podcast The White Vault, which primarily takes place in the first 2 seasons of Svalbard, and you'd be surprised how many other people I've talked to who listen to that podcast say things like they should have just walked back to Ny-Ålesund instead of waiting to die from those monsters. The blizzard might have been bad, but they would have still had a better chance than staying with the monsters, and that's why hopefully those people will never actually go to Svalbard, because they will be dead in a day. Norwegian here, you're totally right about the danger of hiking in avalanche-prone areas, considering the fact that accidents happen quite often because people are not taking precautions. We've already had 4 fatal avalanche accidents this winter, if I remember correctly, as well as many injured in accidents. This can definitely go up if more people are not careful enough. Story 2. I live in the Netherlands, and I'd say it's quite safe for tourists here. And then, I remembered the time I was visiting Amsterdam and saw a sign warning tourists about some stupid gang selling white heroin as cocaine. Don't fall for the myth that anything goes in Amsterdam, people. Hard drugs are as illegal and unsafe as anywhere else. When I was in Amsterdam, I had a drug dealer following me. He told me all the drugs he was selling, and I said no thanks. He followed me for around 6 blocks, constantly repeating all the drugs he could sell me. I turned into a hotel, and he still followed me until I loudly said, "I don't want your freaking drugs." He bolted out of there. I had a similar experience in Amsterdam. The guy offered to sell me Coke or X, and I just kept walking. He didn't follow me for 6 blocks, but did follow me for about 2 to 3 blocks, constantly asking me to buy. That said, I really enjoyed Amsterdam, and have since been back and look forward to my next trip there. My wife and I had also had something similar to this on holiday. A local guy on a jet ski landed on the beach when we were in the Caribbean, casually strolled over and asked if we wanted to party with Charlie. My wife, who was ever so innocent of such things, was asking who this Charlie was and why he wanted to party at 11 a.m. whilst we were having a pleasant stroll on the beach. She even asked the drug dealer if he was Charlie and why he was talking in the third person, as I hurriedly tried to drag her away quicker. As soon as the armed police appeared on their patrol of the beach, he ever so not casually ran back and booked it on his jet ski. My wife never did get to meet Charlie, but soon understood understood why after I explained. This and our almost role as drug mules story in Thailand are two funny drug-related stories my wife likes to tell. My parents were visiting Amsterdam as part of a tour. My dad is pretty street smart. He said this guy was walking towards him, staring right at him, and he had dreadlocks and the biggest swagger he had ever seen. My dad thought he was going to start something with it. As he got right close to my dad, he turned to him and quietly said for him to go straight to the two police officers just around the corner my parents were approaching. My dad was confused and walked on, and as Mr. Dreadlocks had said, there were two police officers. My dad walked towards them and the police motioned them over. Turns out Dreadlocks were undercover and had seen someone steal out of my mom's bag. A few minutes later, another two uniformed police returned my mom's purse to her. Come to Vancouver, BC. You can now buy retail packaged MDMA, ketamine, LSD, mushrooms, and 2CB, but not coke or heroin at shops, like the drugstore. The city decriminalized everything under 3.5 grams. Being able to buy name-brand drugs and the availability of GCMS drug screening, getyourdrugstested.com, caused everyone to clean up the supply of raver candy right quick. Without the impurities and with known dosing, recreational drugs are extremely safe. Just stay away from anything with addictive properties. Ketamine, I'm looking at you. Most festivals have a portable GCMS in a suitcase, so you can get your party favors tested. It's now normalized in the party scene. Story 3. Traffic in Thailand and Vietnam. One of the highest rates of traffic fatalities in the world. I went to Vietnam last year to visit family, and I can believe it. Imagine my shock as a person who was basically trained to always wear seatbelts to be put in the front seat of a cab where none of the seatbelts worked before the driver proceeded to drive at like 80 miles per hour, weaving between hundreds of motorcycles at 10 p.m. On a similar note, I was also basically trained to always wear life jackets on boats, so imagine my surprise when the boat tour guide said we didn't need them. As a longtime biker, what I really don't understand is why so many tourists are willing to get on a motorbike in Vietnam when they don't ride back home. It's a lovely country, and I'd love to go back and ride some more, but it was also some of the hardest riding I've done. And that was with decades of experience both on the road and off-road. Same. I spent years teaching myself to ride, first in California, then in Italy, so I could do that trip. Even then, I spent the first couple of weeks going, holy crap, should I cancel this whole thing? No amount of practice prepares you for a methed out bus driver YOLOing his way around a blind corner in your lane. It bothers me that people act like Southeast Asia is a totally chill and reasonable place to teach yourself an already dangerous hobby. You need to be able to be in full control of a motor before you can approach the insanity that is Viet traffic. If you can't ride at home, don't expect to ride there. My friend's ex and her son's dad was over in Thailand teaching English. My friend got a call from my ex's mom that he had been killed in a vehicle accident in Thailand. I don't know how she does it, knowing that one day she'll have to really explain what happened to her son and that now he's without a dad. My friend was actually reuniting with her ex for the sake of their son, just starting to have an amicable co-parenting relationship, and was going to send her son to see him in a couple of weeks' time when she got the call. Her son is only 8, and this happened a couple of years ago. The videos I've seen of traffic over there are wild, and I thought driving in Mexico was crazy. I've been to Thailand a few times. What blew my mind was how highways are designed. They don't always have overpasses or off-ramps. If you're driving off a highway, it often cuts to a direct turn. If you want to drive across a highway, you have to first get on the highway and drive a distance. Then you'll get to an opening in the barrier and you do a U-turn into oncoming traffic, and then proceed to cut across lanes to get to your exit. My girlfriend felt I was overreacting when I said there was no chance in hell I'd want to get on a tuk-tuk when we were there. Story 4. Australia. I've met plenty of European tourists who have wanted to just drive through the outback while being woefully unprepared. Just basic stuff like not knowing what to do in an emergency and not having enough water. It's not a joke. People die out there all the time, and it'll be 40°C plus and hundreds of kilometers before you see someone again if something goes wrong. Bushwalking too. Very dangerous. It's hard to wrap your head around how unbelievably huge, remote, hostile, featureless, and difficult to navigate it is. I know the US has a lot of remote areas, but in Australia, they're really remote and exceptionally hard to navigate through. Vast expanses of land, forest or bush, like 5-hour drives, which look identical and have no landmarks. There's a crazy amount of stories of hikers who get lost and vanish in the Tasmanian wilderness or similar, and when you go there, you can see exactly why. I have no idea how the early explorers managed it. The hostility of the conditions deserves a mention too. Australia outside of the cities is the only place I've ever been where I felt like the landscape was actively trying to kill me. A lot of people don't realize that Australia is the same size as the 50 contiguous US states, but with less than 10% of the population. Better yet is the fact that 87% of Australians live within 50 kilometers of the coastline, and a vast majority of those are on the east, south, and southwest coastlines. This means that we have less than 3 million people occupying an area that is almost as large as the continental USA. That sounds very similar to Canada. Australia has a population density of 3.35 per square kilometer. It looks like online, with Canada being about 4.35. In Canada, the vast majority of the population resides in Ontario, Quebec, a prairie province, or BC, which probably takes up less than half of Canada. The rest is dense woods, lots of snow and mountains. I live in Newfoundland, and we have some remote areas that go on for hundreds of square kilometers filled with bog that will swallow a truck and patches of forest you can't see the second row of trees in. Yeah, I saw a documentary a while ago where 4 British lads had driven into the outback in a borrowed car and hadn't got enough fuel or water. They ran out and were pretty much screwed, even after resorting to try and drink urine to stay hydrated. Luckily, a local rancher passed by and they were saved, but it could have been a different story entirely. Plus, when they got back to civilization, they found out Mr. Gilbert was shagging Will's mum. I went on a bus tour to Uluru when I was a kid, from a camp we were staying at. After a few hours there and then back on the bus, 45 minutes later, someone pointed out a Japanese tourist hadn't got back on, so we turned around. We eventually found him. Instead of staying near a shaded water station, he decided to walk around it to find people. It must have only been a few hours on top of the visit, but he was severely dehydrated and about to collapse. I shudder to think what would have happened if we were another hour away before we found him. People die quickly out there. Story 5. In New Zealand, we don't have any animals, insects, snakes, etc. that will kill you, but we have the most amazing hole in our ozone layer. White people will get sunburnt within 30 minutes in the summer unprotected. I get sunburnt within 15. If I spent a whole day in the sun without protection, I'd be willing to bet I'd still be sunburnt/peeling a month later. Yep, German tourist here. Last year we took a 1-month trip to New Zealand, went on a hike and forgot the sunscreen. Thought it wouldn't be that bad. First time I actually had blisters on my ears, neck, and face and arms. I was insane. I didn't understand why this happens to tourists in Australia until I went to Europe. Then I learned the sun isn't trying to burn your face off everywhere else in the world, just on our part. I could walk around for an entire day in summer without getting burnt. It was crazy, and the highest SPF anyone sold seemed to be 15. My brother, Mexican, dated a Norwegian guy a few years ago. The first time he came to Mexico to visit, he tried to take his shirt off to walk 2 blocks to get tanned, and my brother tried to stop him. I must add, we grew up in northern Mexico, so reaching 45 is pretty common. He could not understand how everyone looked tanned without sunbathing. He did get badly sunburnt from walking 2 blocks to the store in the middle of July. On the other hand, when I visited them in the next May, I thought it was odd to see people in bikinis sunbathing on the grass at 15 Celsius. Then it rained and the temperature dropped for the next 2 weeks, and it all made sense. Story 6. Sweden, for example, it's all sleek design and meatballs until you stumble into a moose traffic jam. Reindeers, all the time. Really scary to be driving on the highway and suddenly freaking Rudolph and 18 of his buddies are hanging out on the side of the road, licking up salt and just chilling. On the other hand, I also stumbled upon a cattle traffic jam in France one time. Theoretically, it can happen in every country where large animals live in the wild, or where someone is stupid enough not to close the fence. In my home country, there's a tribe who just let their cattle graze freely in the city, so you are very likely to find a traffic jam caused by a herd of cattle. Their reason? The city is in an area that used to be their ancestors. I respect that. Story 7. While I wouldn't say dangerous, Ireland has a strong and growing antisocial behavior problem that is not being sufficiently addressed. I was standing on the corner in Dublin one day and this young punk said he wanted to have a go at me because I was staring at his girl. I'm legally blind and carry a cane. The freaking lack of common sense. Agreed. I moved just as youth violence was ramping up, but I left behind friends who live in rougher areas in Dublin. I visited not too long ago and my group was being hilariously threatened threatened by a 10-year-old boy. It would have quickly been less funny if he had a weapon though. A 10-year-old isn't an issue, but when it's 10 10-year-olds all attacking you at once, it's a real problem. And people are paralyzed with fear because the justice system here is very harsh on adults with life to worry about and basically lets kids get away with anything short of actual murder. It's a running joke that teenagers get let off with suspended sentences even on their 20th or 30th appearance in court. Yeah, this was gonna be my comment to the thread. Any country you're in where you stumble onto an aggressive group of young teen boys with nothing to lose and nothing to do. Sure, you can point to specific stats and demographics in some countries that might be worse danger on average, but this one is pretty much universal. One of my friends who said he got mugged by kids made him feel, at first, like he couldn't fight back because it was unfair to punch someone in the head some 2 feet shorter than you, but that's certainly an advantage they have before piling onto you collectively in it. It's mostly Dublin. Inner city Dublin to be exact. As somebody born and raised in Dublin, I can tell you that certain parts have always been dodgy. Dublin is split in two, north side and south side. Everything north of the river is the north side and everything south is the south side. Most of the problems you will encounter will be on the north side, particularly from Connolly Station up Talbot Street, the surrounding side streets off Talbot, O'Connell Street, Abbey Street, Henry Street, and the surrounding streets off Henry. The south side is where Temple Bar is and where most of the tourists are. Temple Bar is relatively safe. Do most of your tourism on the south side and maybe do your day things during daylight hours on the north. Don't venture into O'Connell Street at night. You won't get shot or stabbed, but you may just get mugged. Take a taxi from the airport. There are buses to the city center, but unless you're traveling during the daytime, don't take them. Or if you do, get off at Tara Street and go from there. Don't get off on the north side. This is not a new thing. These areas were dodgy back in the 80s too, but now drugs have been added to the mix. Use common sense and be aware of your surroundings. Don't park your car full of crap and leave it in a parking lot. I remember back in the late 80s telling a family from New York City that you can't leave your luggage strapped to your roof while you go check into the Gresham Hotel. You wouldn't do it in New York City. Why would you think you can do it in Dublin? Story 8. Trinidad. The capital has some of the most dangerous places on earth. Wife's family is from there. I'm not allowed to visit when they go back. I'm white, and they emphatically insist they cannot keep me safe. Even my wife and her brother need to have escorts everywhere because they didn't grow up there and the locals know it. I'm not from Trinidad, but I am a POC who didn't grow up where I was born, which is a relatively dangerous place. What you described is my experience too. I look just like everybody else, but I would be singled out immediately. I don't speak the main local language, and with my accent, it was clear I was a foreigner. I'm unlikely to ever go back again. I wish I could have gone back to Trinidad more as a child, but because of the crime, I didn't see much of my family there for 20 years. And we only ended up going back down because my mother died, and we made sure to have all the Hindu rituals done with her ashes there. It could become the top destination in the Caribbean if something could be done to get rid of the crime. I'd say Jamaica was scarier, had cruise stops there, and we were told very specifically not to take any taxi that wasn't cruise affiliated. Well, someone did and got taken to the other side of the island and extorted at gunpoint to get back to the ship in time. Most people there were very nice. Food was awesome, but there were so many hustlers there, they got annoying as hell and scary and pushy sometimes. Lots of side-eyes places too. Not somewhere you want to get caught out at night. Trinidad didn't give me those vibes, but I'm not saying my experience is everyone's. Trini here, not just the capital. Everywhere you're unsafe. There are people breaking into your homes in the most remote areas and killing you for no reason. They kill 60 years of seniors on a regular basis. Imagine living your whole life for some devil to come into your home, beat you mercilessly, and kill you afterward. People do drive-by on bicycles and ride away. This happened recently to someone. They shoot children, be it a stray bullet from a shooting. They kidnap, rape, and kill women. There is some idiotic gang war where fools choose numbers, 6, 7, 8, or whatever that's about, and sing Trinidad songs, which is causing a ripple effect. They follow you from the bank or ATM to your home and rob you, if not kill you, for the money. The list can be endless. Every day there's something new. People die daily. There is so much corruption in the government. These deaths mean nothing. Sometimes they joke about it in Parliament or the news. Do not come to Trinidad. Also, Trinidadian criminals are hiding in Tobago, and recently crime has been growing in Tobago. You are less likely to get killed in Tobago. Story 9. Scotland. We can be lethal. A drunk Scottish dude crossed the road from a pub to harangue me while I was buzzing into a building in central London for an appointment earlier, totally unprompted by anything, right up in my face, slurring, "I was brought up Catholic, so I know how to protect a woman. You just give me your number right now and let me know if anyone ever harasses you and I'll sort them out on the spot." Literally the most terrifying chivalry I've ever experienced. The first time I went to Scotland with my mates, there were some English chavs being dickheads in town, and we were all thinking these chavs were gonna cause some trouble. Some Scottish emos were walking by and utterly messed up the chavs, and when I mentioned it to my Scottish mate, he said English hardmen aren't even 2 on the scale of Scottish hardmen. Imagine the shame of getting knocked out by an emo walking by. Story 10. Canada is the inverse of Australia. In Australia, everything looks terrifying, but if you keep your distance, most of it just wants to be left alone, and most of the time it's just as terrified of you, except for the birds, they're just jerks. In Canada, everything looks adorable. Very little of it is afraid of humans due to habituation to direct contact because no one respects the danger, and all of it will absolutely rip your throat out. That beaver can chew through a maple tree in minutes. Do you want to know what the overgrown lake rat will do to a femur? That moose can walk away from a collision with a semi-truck, weighs more than a small car, and can outrun you, and will not think twice about turning you into an antler ornament. The deer will not think twice about eating you if you happen to get gored to death. I'm going to say that again. The deer will eat you. These adorable seal pups, Mama Seal is bigger than you are, and there's a reason they're effectively wolves in the water. That squirrel? Oh, the squirrel is harmless. Kidding. It will take your finger and scratch out both of your eyes. And all of that doesn't even count the actual predators. No, those aren't puppies, kitties, and teddy bears. If you're lucky, they will remove your hand. If you're unlucky, they will remove your head. Implausibly, the only things that aren't going to actively try to kill you are the snakes and spiders. The only common point, the birds are still jerks. Bless the cobra chicken. The number of stupid people trying to approach a fully grown moose, or worse, a calf, is depressing. They are 2-meter tall, half-ton animals that have the leg muscles to spend all day walking through snowdrifts, can swim across semi-frozen rivers, and usually are the winners in automobile impacts. And you, a random stranger, are going to try and walk up to them and touch its baby? The first time I ran into a moose in Canada, I was walking out of a grocery store and a wall of people just standing inside the doors looking out into the parking lot. Giant moose just chilling there. I've never seen a moose, amazed by its size, so I'm in a hurry to walk up to the auto doors and someone actually said, "Save the American!" Someone pulled me back inside. I was then treated to a lecture on all the ways a moose can and will murder you, probably just for the sport of it. Story 11. Many parts of the United States. For example, New Orleans has a higher murder rate and overall crime than many cities in Mexico, but we have this perception of Mexico being dangerous and New Orleans as a fun party spot that you can get blackout drunk on the streets and stay safe in. Edit. Some of y'all are really taking this to me saying Mexico is not dangerous instead of New Orleans is very dangerous. It's literally nestled with Mexican cities and in the top 20 dangerous cities worldwide. Reading comprehension is wild. Mexico has the top 7 highest homicide rate cities in the Americas, and 9 of the top 10, New Orleans is 8. The top 3 cities have almost double the homicide rate than any American city. Also, context is important. American cities, by and large, are very safe for tourists. It's just a few areas of big cities that you should avoid. And even then, if you're clearly not from there, you'll probably be fine. They're far more dangerous for people who live there because of gang violence. Many Mexican cities are very dangerous for tourists, to the point that it's easier to list cities that are safe, especially for white Americans. I go to NOLA quite often as my spouse's family lives in NOLA. NOLA is interesting because when people say New Orleans, people think of the French Quarter, which honestly is relatively safe. Of course, stay near the crowds at night and you'll be fine. When you venture out, you need to be careful. I just spent a week in Mexico City. I only visited wealthy neighborhoods, but everything felt very safe. There was a massive police presence in the center by all the government buildings. There were homeless people, but they were less aggressive than in the US. It felt very safe overall. Story 12. While I would in no way call Denmark a dangerous place in general, there are some things that tourists are not aware of. Many Germans go on vacation on the western coast of the Jutland Peninsula. Too many of them don't know that you do not mess with the North Sea. Riptides are somewhat common and scary as hell. The current and waves can be more violent than you expect if you're not used to the sea. You can go swimming pretty safely, but don't be an idiot and definitely don't go out on an inflatable mattress that will float away to England before you realize what's going on. The so-called Free City of Christiania in Copenhagen can be a fun place to visit, but it is also the hub of organized crime involving drugs. In August of last year, a number of innocent bystanders were caught in a gangland shooting and wounded at a bar. The man who was targeted was shot several times and died. There are gangland shootings there a couple of times a year, as well as assaults and stabbings. Also, don't take pictures when you're there. The weed dealers are not tolerant of that. For the love of God, if you are not used to riding a bicycle in the city, do not rent a bike and drive around Copenhagen. We will hate you for it and you might get hurt or hurt someone else. Other than that, come enjoy Denmark. I'm an artist traveling the world sketching wherever I go, and I was drawing the main square in Christiania, also known as Pusher Street, the open-air drug market, and this enormous, surly, black-bearded Danish-Syrian man approaches me. "What the hell are you doing?" He repeats it a few times and I show him the sketch. It's hardly a police photo. The man yells at me again a few more times. I repeat, "I'm drawing," indignantly, waiting to feel properly intimidated because I grew up in South Central LA and have a death wish. Then he seems to be nervous suddenly and looks over my shoulder at somebody as if to appeal to them. I turn around and notice an old, long, white-haired, shirtless man behind me in the doorway who tells him I'm not taking photos, I'm drawing, and he says to the dealer it's all right. I realized he'd been watching the whole time, watching the whole square, just an old, nondescript hippie running the whole show. Now that guy was terrifying. Good thing for me, he likes art. Christiania is by no means the hippie utopia it can be rumored to be. When I visited it, it felt like any problem area in my city in Sweden and mostly felt dirty and sketchy. There was a brooding police raid starting to happen, so that might have soured the mood that day though, but I've been mostly met with agreement when I recounted the experience. Love Copenhagen overall though. Story 13. Honestly, we should be able to submit parts of the USA here because Arizona gets its fair share of people who don't believe you can become dangerously overheated and dehydrated even on a trail within city limits, especially in the summer. I don't even know why people come then. Phoenix hits 120 degrees Fahrenheit regularly in the summer. If you can't fathom how hot that feels, great, please don't hike here in the summer. Yes, the scenery is gorgeous. There are trails everywhere. It's also literally a desert and hotter than anywhere else you've ever been. I am one of those idiots who have hiked during a heat wave in Arizona. My husband and I went to Sedona during the summer years ago, and it was hitting 120 degrees Fahrenheit during the day. We thought we would be safe hiking in the shaded canyons early in the morning, but I think I almost died. We cut the hike short because I just felt like something really bad was going to happen. We made it back to the car and my face was bright red and my lips were white. I'm still not sure what level of heat stroke that would be or how close I came to not making it out of there, but I've never felt or looked like that before or since. I recovered just fine and I will never make that mistake again. For real, in Death Valley and the Mojave and SoCal, people are vastly underprepared, especially Europeans. The guy in Germany was asking about a trip out during the hurricane on the 22. Everyone was rescheduling or going somewhere else. It's even more dangerous. Flash flooding and in good times no cell reception. Finally just told him, if you're bent on doing this you needed 4WD, all-terrain tires, self-rescue boards, a satellite communicator, and enough food and water for at least your trip duration plus a full week extra, because it would take that long to get rescued. Hope he rescheduled. Alaska can be pretty dangerous depending on where you go. Massive predators are common, and even the prey animals will put a hoof through your ribcage. One of my friends worked in the cafeteria at a far northern pipeline facility. When he takes out the trash, he is required to be accompanied by no less than 2 guards armed with shotguns. Polar bears do not fear humans in the slightest and will treat you like anything else they hunt, including following your scent for miles. A more common occurrence, though, is crapping your pants after turning the corner on a sidewalk and suddenly being less than 10 feet away from a moose calf and not knowing where the mother is. Story 14. Thailand. Yes, I backpacked Thailand and had many scary instances. Tourism is number one there, and any incident is swept under the table. I saw someone pull a gun at a tourist in a restaurant. The restaurant immediately cleared. I walked by again in a couple of hours and it was full again like nothing happened. I was stung by a boxed jellyfish and couldn't feel my legs. I went to the hospital and was told by a doctor that a tourist died that very same day on the very same beach. No signs or warnings at the beach. The beach was full. I would never have known if I didn't go to the hospital. A tourist was bartering with a seller. The seller pulled out a knife and threatened the tourist. The tourist took off. Everything continued as normal. I've spent quite a bit of time there to visit my ex. I never had much trouble except when a Thai guy said something to my girlfriend, but she didn't know what he said. Judging by the way he was acting, it was probably something sexual. We also hailed a taxi driver once. He stopped for us. She got in, then he screamed at her. She got out, and then he picked up a group of 3 or 4 women just down the road. No idea why he took them, but not us. If you're gonna go to the crappy areas like Soy Cowboy, then of course you're gonna have trouble. Crappy areas attract crappy people and criminals. Out of curiosity, me and my ex stepped about 10 meters into Soy Cowboy and got the hell out of there. On the way there was a Middle Eastern guy trying to sell obviously stolen watches. Almost forgot one. On my first visit, a taxi driver handed me my change. My girlfriend looked and called him out because he handed me coins that were actually tokens for a car wash. She wasn't Thai but had lived there for over a year, so knew what baht coins looked like. He tried to convince her that they were real, but she wasn't having it and he eventually gave in. So while some stuff did happen, it wasn't anything major. That said, a family member's friend was robbed of her money and passport at knife point by 2 guys in broad daylight more than a decade ago. Thanks for watching until the end. If you have a similar story to these that you'd like to share with us, please leave it in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please leave us a like and subscribe. For more videos like this one right now, please stop by our channel. Thanks again, and see you next time.